Hey there, my name is Rebecca Johnson and I'm a licensed mental health counselor and I specialize in narcissistic abuse recovery. So if you've been hanging out on my channel at all lately, you have noticed that I have been running quite a few videos on narcissistic parents. Last time we did one on boundaries, we did another one on the best books that I would recommend, and today we're going to talk about what to do when your narcissistic parent pushes back on your boundaries. So I want to ask you to imagine just for a second what it would feel like to have boundaries with your narcissistic parent, to not feel enmeshed with them, to not feel controlled by them, to not be manipulated by them. So hopefully by the end of this video, you can really have some takeaways that can help you establish those boundaries and be consistent with those boundaries, along with taking care of yourself. Establishing those boundaries and holding firm to those boundaries is very challenging work, but I want you to know that it is worth it in the end. The key is to know that it's important to stand your ground, because this is for your own emotional well-being. Boundaries themselves create space for you to grow and to heal. So that could be physical space, or that can be emotional space, or that can be both. So I want to talk today about some steps to consider when setting those boundaries and when you feel like your parent is being a bully with those boundaries. The first thing to keep in mind is to stay calm and be firm. They're going to try to provoke an emotional reaction from you, and it's important for you to stay composed while maintaining respect for them and maintaining your own idea of what's important to you. Another thing is to avoid arguing with them, to avoid being defensive, because that is only going to pour gasoline on the fire. Remember that if you stay firm and stay calm when they are pushing back against your boundary, it's only going to benefit you in the long run. Secondly, when your parent is bulldozing through your boundary, it's important to really reiterate those boundaries as much as you need to. Sometimes that can look like just repeating yourself with the same statement again and again in order for them to really get the idea of what is important to you and that you are going to hold that ground. Again, it's necessary to really be calm, to communicate clearly of the boundaries that you've set. The consistency is really key here as well. In the way you communicate to them. Your words, your body language needs to portray that your boundaries are non-negotiable. Another thing that you can do when you are feeling that your parent is resisting your boundary, or that they're, well, not or, but they are pitching a temper tantrum because you have set a boundary with them. You can use I statements. So I statements are expressing your own feelings and your needs. So for instance, I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I need space to fill in the blank, whatever that may need to be. So doing that, coming from a place of where you're at with this and what's important to you, rather than accusing them, can be really key for your own mental well-being in this moment. Additionally, the acronym JADE, so JADE, justify, argue, defend, or explain. Keep in mind to not do any of these things. Do not justify why you are setting this boundary. Do not argue when they are giving you pushback. Do not defend your position with this boundary, and don't explain it away. You don't owe any explanations or justifications. You setting the boundary in and of itself for yourself is what's necessary. Narcissistic individuals really thrive on creating a debate, and they want to draw you into an argument. So again, JADE, justify, argue, defend, explain. Don't do those things. You absolutely have the right to set your boundaries without needing to convince them or sell them on the idea. Another thing that is very important is to stay emotionally detached. Narcissists are going to try to manipulate your emotions to get their own way. And so if you could keep in mind maybe something visual of reminding yourself that maybe you're wrapped in bubble wrap, or another kind of picture image you can put in your head in order to stay emotionally detached in that moment when they are poking and pushing those buttons in order to get you into this manipulation, or to manipulate your emotions, really. So do not react to their attempts to do this. If you do, you're giving your power away from them. So the whole goal in staying emotionally detached is you controlling your own responses, your own reactions, and not handing that power over to them. Another thing you can do is really to stay consistent. So when they're pushing back on you, when they are resisting you, when they're really throwing their temper tantrum because they're not getting what you want, really armor yourself up in knowing that you have to stay consistent. If that's repeating yourself gently and calmly again and again, do that. If you tend to waver just a little bit or on occasion with them, maybe you waver a little bit every third time you try to set a boundary with them, they're going to know that there are holes in that boundary and they're going to do whatever they can to push their way through that. So all of this work that you've done is for nothing at this point. Something that I'm saying often on these videos and I consider incredibly important is to seek support. So surround yourself with a support system of friends, community, even a therapist, most definitely, that can really help you shore up those boundaries to remind you of what a healthy perspective is and to encourage you on this journey of setting and being consistent with these boundaries. It may come to you limiting your contact or taking a significant break from the relationship because your parent continues to try to push through your boundary or try to manipulate you in that moment. So that is really okay to take a break from that. It's okay for you to set those limits in contact with them, time spent with them. Don't feel bad about that. You're not a bad person for setting boundaries. You are considering yourself again and what's important to you. So that segues into the next subject, which is having good self-care, practicing good self-care. So you have to prioritize your own emotional and mental well-being. Find activities that bring you joy, that help relax you, that bring a sense of peace, that can keep you grounded. Self-care in and of itself helps keep you centered and helps build resilience. If your parent is bulldozing your boundaries, whichever direction you're trying to set them, you're going to have to establish the consequences and stick to them and be consistent with them. So when you think about the situation with your parent, you probably have an idea of what that's going to look like or feel like. I would encourage you to identify what those consequences are. You can communicate those consequences, but you don't always have to, because sometimes that's going to make the situation even more volatile. Examples of this might be limiting contact if they continue to push through your boundaries. Again, it might come down to taking a break from the relationship or taking a break from interacting. It could also include setting limits or really letting them know that certain conversations, certain topics are not going to be discussed. As with all of these things, if it's self-care, if it's I statements, and here now again with this with consequences, consistency is essential. I would want you to also focus on your own growth. Setting these boundaries are your journey in creating freedom for yourself and creating a healthier life for yourself. So focus on that growth, right? Take some of the energy that is focused on them and turn that inward to empower yourself and to promote your own healing and your own growth. Please remember that you setting boundaries and being consistent with the consequences of the boundary violation does not mean you're a bad person. Because you've been raised in this environment, that shame comes up really quickly. So I would encourage you to certainly do what you can to take care of yourself and to eliminate that shame. You're not a bad person. You cannot change them, but you can change yourself. And something I've said periodically on this channel is you can't change them, but you can change the way you're doing this relationship. So the last thing is to consider professional help. If you need additional guidance, if you need additional support that goes beyond a support system, I would really want you to find somebody that specializes in narcissistic abuse, specializes in toxic relationships in order to get that therapeutic and clinical support. They will be able to help you cope. They will help you with these boundaries and give you a real kind of backbone in that and really shore you up in those things. It's imperative that you recognize that changing the narcissistic parent's behavior is virtually impossible, if not incredibly difficult. So accept that for what that is. You are dealing with an unreasonable person. They won't fully understand and they're not going to respect your boundaries. This is what it is. Stop trying to fight against that. Accept that for what it is. However, still have those boundaries and still be willing to set the consequences and the follow through when those boundaries are violated. Your primary focus should be on protecting your own well-being and maintaining your own mental and emotional health. Another focus could most certainly be the freedom that comes from having those boundaries, having those firm boundaries with your parent and not allowing their manipulations or their bullying behavior to ruin that for you. So just like I mentioned at the top of the video, imagine what it would be like in a life in which those boundaries were clear and imagine a life where those boundaries were clear. How does that feel for you? Just thinking about that. So I would use that as your goal setting, as your encouragement to continue to just put one foot in front of the next in setting these boundaries and making sure that there's consequences for when you get that pushback. Thank you so much for watching. That's all I've got for today. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I would love for you to do so. I love hearing from you as well. So if there's things in future videos you would like me to talk about, please mention that in the comments. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.